So we've been waiting for these. Look what showed up. We've got the new Ripcord Ace. So we're gonna whip this thing open and take a look at the new rest. Everybody's been calling wanting to know what the results are, so we swindled a few out of them. Let's make sure we get a right-handed one. Yep. So there's a few of them, not a ton. So let's bring you over here and you can get a little closer view. How's that? So pretty good packaging. Looks nice. Ace in the hole, I guess. What? Now the one thing right out of the bat I'm going to say that I noticed is look how narrow that little devil is. Maybe we should grab a couple arrows and see what the sizes we have to play. So here's a regular size arrow, so that'd be like a 35-55 or a 55-75, like a gold tip. A little bit of room in there. Obviously it's going to fit your skinnier shafts. Here's the 22 series. You can see that a 22 series actually, it lays and has plenty of room in the bottom, but at the top it's not quite there. Now here's an absolute no-go. That's a triple X, so you're not going to get that to fit in there. So target archers might need to be probably swap out to the old style launcher would be my guess if you wanted to shoot it as a target with a fatter shaft. This bolt, and I've seen this quite a bit with some of the manufacturers, but if you look how far this should go in, all the way up to about there, when you put it in there, that's all the farther you get. So when you go to torque it down, you're gonna have a hard time because the bolts either have some sort of a coating or anodizing or whatever that's not cleaned out, and you can barely see. If I force it, it stays. So just my only little complaint. Okay, so one of the other items that comes with this is the Ripcord launch pad. And the launch pad, again, kind of acts like what Hoyt's already done with their bows. You've got this rubber liner in there, which is really nice because if your arrow falls off the rest, you don't get that clank that you would normally get against the riser. It's just nice and quiet, soft-wise. So this is nice if you have a bow that requires, all aluminum up there and there's nothing, which is 90% of the bows out there. You would actually put this in the launch area. Now on a Hoyt, we already have that nice round bottom shelf. So if you wanted to use your arrow, normally, see, it would draw from that point right there. So there's really no reason to use something like this on this type of a setup. But if we were to use something that had a flat riser or a flat shelf, then this would simply be detached, slid back underneath. You'd obviously want to keep the front edges of the launchers away from the end here, but that would be an area that you'd use it. So there's a couple things that I think we need to point out. So when we put one of these on, we square it up with the riser. You notice that it's square this way. If we were to allow it to come over to where the back bracket, this would actually tilt forward a little bit. What that does is if you come around here, when you look at the launchers, the real critical thing with the drop away rest is don't ever let it touch the actual bow itself. If you look really close, you notice that there's a gap between the bottom of this launcher and this. I can't tell you how many times we see bows in here where people have fletching contact, And 9 times out of 10, the reason why they have fletching contact is because they're allowing their rest to actually come in contact with the riser, so it's not getting into the brake system. So it doesn't matter what kind of rest it is, unless it's a limb-driven rest that actually pulls it out of the way. These rests that use springs to get down, you have to be careful to not let those touch the riser themselves, because if they touch the riser themselves, they're actually bouncing back up, and that's where you're getting your fletching contact. A lot of the conception is that people believe that rests aren't fast enough. Almost every rest out there that's spring driven is fast enough to get out of the way. What we're seeing is that when the rest goes down like that, you're seeing a bounce and then back up, and then getting fletching contact as the rest or the arrow's trying to come across the top. So really critical to make sure you keep your launcher as flat as possible, and to make sure you have no contact with your shelf or the riser itself. So when we set these up, if you look really close in here, you'll see that in here, right along that groove right there, this rest could actually go, and it would kick the rest forward and put the launcher more down into the actual throat of the grip. So we leave it flat. One, I personally think it looks better. But two, you're not putting the tips of these closer to where they're coming in contact with the riser. So we've got it set up, we've squared it off, we put it through. You know, the other critical thing is to make sure that you're close as you can to the center of your burger button hole, or where the rest bolts on, is where this is going through. I mean, typically where you set up your knocking point, whether it's an 1/8 inch knock high, whatever, the closer you get to the center of that burger button hole, the closer you are mathematically to the center of your riser. That's not the case on every single bow manufacturer out there, but it is on 90% of the bows. So just something to keep in mind. Notice that we actually run ours through the cable itself. We put a string serving on the top to tie that in so that can't travel up. I'm not a fan of the football, the plastic clamps, but you do require a bow shop, or you have to have a press or something to be able to separate that string. Don't try to use a string separator. You try to force a string separator through there, you're going to end up with a bunch of little strands that you've broke trying to force that through and do it yourself. So if you don't have a bow press, use the football. But if you can have access to a bow press, or have your pro shop do it, go in and serve it. And on a Hoyt, you've got to keep it fairly low because of the riser coming in contact with the riser. You don't want to keep this clear up along here. If it's up here too high, you're going to be rubbing this all the way up and down. So you want to get down here a little bit farther, and you'll notice that when we cycle the bow, the stroke itself doesn't pull it all the way from up here clear down the side of the riser. It actually pulls really close right through here, so you're going to get that gap where you're not, dragging on your riser itself. So let's go to the tunnel. We're in the tunnel now. Going to run it through the paper. We've got everything set. We've set our knocking point at roughly about an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/16 of an inch knock high, and we set our center shot left and right. We've looked down the arrow. We've got it pretty close to where we're splitting the arrow, so we've got a good close reference point. So now we're going to stand about 6 feet from the target, the paper, and we're going to run this through and see what we get. Looks like we need a little bit of adjustment. We've got just a little slight left and a little tiny bit low. If I can, I like to do that off of the string loop itself, and I haven't tightened the string loop. So I'm going to make that adjustment here, because I like where my rest is as far as height, because I'm right through the center of that burger button hole. Now a lot of people might say, what's a burger button? Burger button's old school, what we used to use years and years ago, but the burger button hole is referred to as where the limb or the bolt is that holds on the actual rest itself. So your bolt hole, you want to keep parallel, so that if you were to look at where these run together, you can see that my arrow's right through the middle of that. So I like to keep that, and I'll do as many of my adjustments as I can up and down off the back of this, rather than raise the rest up, because it keeps this arrow being launched right through the center of that. So I'm going to take my up and down out first, and then I'll take my left and right. So that's a good up and down. Now I am going to say this. I don't like where this hole is. This bolt hits right in the center of where this is. So you're going to have a hard time getting this in and out and making any kind of adjustments. Now I do love the fact that you've got this little micro adjust that I can watch your little indicator. So if you look right here, you can see there's a little indicator that gives us a left and right. So I can make really fine tunes, which that is really cool. But this would be nice if it was a little farther across so that we're not hitting, you can already see where just by running a Allen wrench in there, you're gonna have to have a little teeny Allen wrench that goes in and has been cut off if you want to avoid making any kind of marks on your bow itself. So, because you can't quite get into that unless, or you'd have to have some of those Allen wrenches that have the ball on the top. So, just the little things. So we're not getting any vein contact, which is good. And I'm not seeing, the one thing I do love about the Ripcord, I love their launchers for the fact that we don't have to do anything with them. It's really nice that you don't have to worry about putting a felt kit on that doesn't ever last, or when we put our felt kits on the other competitors' rests, then we have to wrap them. We wrap them with a string to hold that felt on, even though there's an adhesive in there, because that adhesive, when it gets wet out in the hunting, when early morning dew or in a rainstorm or snowstorm, that felt gets wet, it comes right off. So we put a felt kit on, and then we end up having to wrap it with a serving all the way around to keep that felt kit on. This mold injected rubber on this riser, or on these launchers themselves, are pretty sweet. So we got a good tear on that last one, so I'm not going to move my left and right anymore. And you can see, just looking at it, we ended up pretty close to a good level knock travel, and you're maybe about 1/8 of an inch roughly high is all. And then we've got, you notice the angle of the launcher is good, so you are going to get that out of the way. And as the trigger of it comes back as this cord gets activated and we get drawn back at a full draw. That's nice, because that extra little travel right there in slow motion, if you were to visualize that, that would allow that arrow to travel another 4 to 6 inches probably before that actual vertical launch, because from there down, so when the rest is right here, from that point down, now we're losing height in the arrow as it gets launched, right? So it's nice that this comes back a little ways and comes perfectly straight up and down, so that when that movement forward, we get just that much more travel to stabilize the arrow before it actually gets out of the way. So I'm going to hold the arrow with my finger just so you can see how much clearance you really truly have when that comes across. Now you'd always want to shoot your odd vein. You always want to shoot your odd vein up, just so that you do have maximum clearance ability. Now some bows, depending on how close you get to the cable itself, you may have to shoot either a low profile vein depending on where your center shot ends up. But that really comes down to the setup. A lot of bow shops are capable of making you have optimum left and rights because they know how to manipulate the cam system to get that to work. So I'm sold. That's a good rest. A lot of people that are in the habit of reaching over and doing one of these, you're just gonna simply reach up here with your thumb, and it's pulled down or activated like that. I do like the fact that if I want to put it down, it's way easy to reset it over the other. So anyway, come on in, we'll give you a chance to play with it. We've got it set up on our 2015 Carbon Spider Turbo. Shoots through a Spider Turbo phenomenal, so that's a plus. So come on in and see us.